Welcome to the LeaderImpact podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities around the world dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make this show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social at LeaderImpact. And if you're listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Robert Seguin. Rob is the managing partner of Thrive Partnership Group since 2003, offering global clients organizational health consulting services ranging from culture strategy navigation to strategic and brand planning facilitation to high-performance team development and leadership coaching. His 2 decades of corporate experience, primarily in the life science industry, culminated in the leading of the global launch of Botox Cosmetic in 2001. He has released his first book called Care, The Surprising Core Leadership Principle for the 21st Century. This guidebook provides inspirational stories, best practice processes, and practical tools for leaders and organizations to tap into the full potential of their technology through people and organizational development and exhibit care for their employees. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Great to be with you today.
It's great to have you. So that surprised me, Botox Cosmetic.
Yeah, I know. A Northern Ontario boy, and these aren't my teeth because they got knocked out being goalie from my older brothers and sisters. Yeah, traipsing around the world launching something in the aesthetic space is just weird.
Wow. And when did you get, when did you get out of that?
We started the launch preparation in '99, and I was in New York at the time, and I got recruited well, actually, they told me I could live wherever I wanted. They said, you can live wherever you want, and I'm Canadian, my wife's Canadian, so we said, okay, well, we're going to come home to Toronto, and they said, great, and turns out Canada was the lead country for the launch. We used it as a pilot, which turned out to be great, and so we got to come home and do the launch here and travel all over the world, and then that was my last corporate gig for the last 3 years, and then in 2003, I started my own organizational development practice, so yeah.
Wow. Gee, I got half your journey right there, but I want to hear more. We usually start with the first question is just hearing a little bit more about your professional story and how you got to where you are today. I know a little bit of it, but if there's any pivotal moments in those journeys that you can share with us.
Well, the first pivotal moment has to be getting hired. I was going to work in the high-tech industry because I was in Ottawa and there was a lot of high-tech going on, and my undergrad was in business. And I was interviewing with a company called Digital, and they were going to put me in a sales position in Ottawa. And at the last minute, they changed their mind, said, would you move to Halifax? And I don't know anybody in Halifax. I had no family. I thought, well, so I kept my eyes open to see if there were other opportunities. The economy wasn't so great. Well, I wrote my last exam, and one of the guys from my class who I'd been kind of social buddies with said, come on, we'll go have a few beers. So we had a few beers. He had a few more than a few beers. And just before he kind of passed out at the bar, he slid a business card across the bar to me from his brother-in-law, who was the national sales manager at a company called SmithKline, which is a big pharmaceutical company. And he said, call my brother-in-law, John. He's got a job and maybe you can interview for it. Well, the next morning I woke up Friday morning and saw this business card in my pocket. And I kind of recalled that he said I should call him. So being a kid who needed a job because I was sick of eating Kraft dinner for the last 3 weeks and I couldn't pay my rent, I was broke. I called this guy, John. He goes, well, I'm in town right now, and I've got one more interview slot open, so why don't you come downtown to Ottawa, put your suit on? So I did, and he liked what I had to say. So Monday I met with the district manager, and Tuesday I was on a plane to Toronto. I was working not for SmithKline, to my surprise. I was working for Allergan, which was a eye care division that they had bought or were in the middle of transacting for Allergan. So yeah, it was a whirlwind. I had never flown before, and I lost my hearing on the flight because my ears popped. So I'm going to meetings, I can't hear anything. I don't know what company I'm working for, so I didn't get off to a great start. But anyway, that was pivotal. But they thought I could sell, so I sold because I'd sold since I was a little kid. Paper routes to pay for hockey and retail clothing and all kinds of stuff. So a little bit of gift to gab, I suppose. And my French was horrible, but good enough for bilingual territory. So yeah, I did a couple of years in sales, and then I had taken a marketing undergrad, and a job opened up for that in Toronto. So I took that and then bounced around all over the place. I ended up doing 18 of my 21 years with that company. I left and came back. Another pivotal part of that journey was about 6 years into my career. The culture had gone from fantastic, great learning ground. So many young men and women had come into Allergan in the mid 80s, mid to late 80s, and got such a tremendous grooming, great culture, great leaders. And then all of a sudden things went sideways. They hired some people who were talented, but just their values were not my values. And so a bunch of the young talent, myself and three or four other top leaders, young women and men left. And then they unfortunately, I never wish this on anything, but one of those guys died in a car accident. And they found out that he was up to lots of bad stuff. He was having inappropriate relationships with people at the office. He was a drug addict. He was encouraging people to come into his little group, and all the poop hit the fan. And after it was done, they invited a number of the young people who had left to come back. So I came back, and then they moved me to California to do a major launch in the US market, which was a feather in my cap. And then I was in the right place at the right time in 1999. I just happened to be at my desk in New York at my home office. My boss called, said, "I'm glad I caught you." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, you work for me. I need you to go to Vancouver." I said, "Well, for all due respect, Sheldon, I don't cover Canada anymore. Why do I need to go to Vancouver?" He said, "Because they want to talk to a Canadian, and you know all the guys in California, and I don't have anybody up here who can do that. So you need to get on a plane Sunday night, change your plans, forget where you're supposed to go. You need to go to Vancouver and meet these doctors who have this crazy idea that you can inject neurotoxin and get rid of wrinkles. They seem to be doing it. They seem to be making a lot of money. We want to know what they're up to, because there are a lot of our sales for Botox, which at the time was only indicated for what they call blepharospasm and strabismus. So strabismus is when little kids get crooked eyes. They'd rather not do surgery to straighten them out because they're little wee kids, right? So they inject them with a neurotoxin to straighten them out. It calms down the overactive muscle, and the kids can see clearly and straight, and the parents don't have to put up with their little child having surgery. So that's what it was originally used for. But this doctor, who was a pediatric ophthalmologist, was married to a dermatologist. So they're in Vancouver, and he's looking at her before and after pictures on some of the adults that she injected. And he said, "Wow, those blepharospasm patients where the lids keep flipping, they look a lot younger. I can use that in my practice." So they started using it in the mid 80s. And then by the time I met them in, would have been 98 or 99, they were 25% of Canada's volume in the neurotoxin, despite the fact that it was being used for all kinds of stuff. And it was all cosmetic. And they had, like, Sylvester Stallone was one of their patients, and all kinds of celebrities that you and I would know in common. So I went to visit them, and as I described in the book, it was a real lesson in leadership. Like, it wasn't the science that was making them successful. It was the way they looked after the patient from start to finish, and the way they treated their employees. It was remarkable. And it impressed me so much that when we came back to do the launch, my boss said, "So we're going to tell a pharmaceutical company that we have to be customer friendly." I don't know that that's going to go over so big, but we designed the launch to try a certain model in Canada, and we let the Americans do their own thing. And turned out our model was actually very successful, following their code of leadership: care for the patient, and make them have a great experience, like a top quality experience, treat your staff really well, and the world will beat a path to your door. And they were right. The numbers proved they were right. And then now it's a $4 billion drug every year after year. So they were doing something right. So, yeah.
Wow. When I look at your path, and I'm going to go right back to having beers with your buddy, and he slides across the card. And you made a comment being at the right place at the right time. Your whole journey sounds like just I feel like, do you ever look back, just step back and sort of look at the whole journey of your life and go, it's exactly...
This is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It makes no sense whatsoever. I'll tell you, the other thing that doesn't make any sense is the negative part of it. So you're probably wondering how I had the best job in the industry. Everybody was like so jealous. I'm flying all over the world, meeting really interesting people. I'm on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, France for 3 weeks in a row. And I'm going up and down the Champs-Élysées telling plastic surgeons who think they're God that they don't know what they're doing when it comes to running the business side of their practice. And they're listening to me, and they're making changes. And I'm thinking, how did I get here? So the reason that all of a sudden I lost that great job was I ended up having a very difficult boss that was put in above the guy who actually sponsored the whole launch. So they replaced him. They brought this fella up, and we had known each other, and I knew we weren't compatible. We had different values in life. He was really smart. He had a lot of skills, but just 180 degrees different in terms of their fiber. So it didn't take long for me to realize that God was trying to tell me, I need you to go somewhere else and do something else. I know you're having fun, but fun is over. I went, oh, darn. Then I resisted it. My ego
Oh, yeah.
pushed back. My coach was trying to be gentle and finally just almost literally grabbed me by the collar one day. And he said, Robert, you need to listen to me. This is not a matter of if, but when. You know that this, you've now heard confirmed through people that you know in common that he's coming after you and he's going to get you. And you have to decide how you want to leave, not whether you're going to leave. And do you want to leave honoring your values, or do you want to succumb to get in the muck with him? And he really got a hold of me at the right time and straightened me out and said, look, let's put a plan together with God's help to put your talent and skills someplace where it can be well used. It's just not here. You have to get over that fact and stop fighting it. And so to George's credit, he got to me at the right time, coached me, and I came to the realization after he gave me all this homework that, coaches give you, like when do you lose track of time and trying to find my core talent. And it's funny, I tell the story in the book I just wrote. I had been on a 10-hour flight back and forth to the UK and Europe, and I came back and I still didn't have my homework done. I had to come up with this purpose statement. And my son was having breakfast one morning, and he was about 8 years old, and he was struggling with a math equation. I'm pretty good at math, so I said, well, bring it over here. I think I see the problem in your formula. So as I was fixing his formula, he took my homework, and he wrote down human gardener at the bottom of this long paragraph of stuff that I had written. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's what I've been trying to figure out for like days and long flights, trying to figure out what my purpose is. And this 8-year-old kid writes down human gardener in a scrawl, sloppy penmanship. And I go, oh, smart little guy. He figured this out. It took me like 3 days and I never even got close. So I took it into George that morning, my coach, and I explained to him. He goes, yeah, that's it. That's what I thought you were since I met you. And yet you thought yourself as a strategist and a sales and marketing guy. But they were both right. Like, once I really thought about it, Lisa, I realized that God's gift to me was I just love seeing people get to their best selves. Right? I coached lots of kids, coached Special Olympics now for the last 10 years, coach a lot of people in their business and sometimes in their personal lives. And it's what stirs my heart. And so I feel so blessed that people like George came along when they did. My wife, my son, some other people grabbed me by the collar, so to speak, and said, "You're not in the right lane here. God wants you to go somewhere else. So come on over here." And it was just, yeah. So
It's
I've been
so
blessed now. I've been doing this sort of organizational health, if you want to call it, for more than 20 years now,
it's
and
so it's so
it's
easy
been
to
very rewarding.
yeah. It's so easy to ignore that when somebody says get in your lane, like and multiple people come at you and you're like, "No, I know better." Like
Oh yeah.
but people are, yeah, I know that about you, or they confirm it, and it's a good feeling if once you start to look for it, it's a really good feeling, but until you recognize it.
Yeah, and I think God had sent me some signals. He'd sent me some signal men and women, and I just refused to listen. So I suppose he hit me between the eyes with a 2x4 and gave me this very obtuse boss where I was so misaligned. And listen, I'm not saying he wasn't a good leader in his own way, but he wasn't for me. Um,
And that's
so to
okay.
be able to, yeah, and for me to be able to land here, and then about 10 years into my own practice, I was coaching sports with a gentleman that you might know, Steve Clements, who is a big part of LeaderImpact in Ontario. And Steve and his dad were running national sports at the time, and they wanted a little outside counsel. So I came in and did a little work with them, and I got to know Steve really well. And Steve was on his own spiritual path, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come and check out LeaderImpact with me? I know you have that as part of your life, and maybe you'd like to join a sort of a fraternal opportunity." And I said, "Sure, I'll try that." So I went to one of those LeaderImpact breakfasts with Steve, and I was craving for an opportunity to engage in that kind of conversation with people who are also seeking harmony between their work life and their spiritual and home life. And it's been a huge blessing to me. I now run my own LeaderImpact group remotely. Everybody went remote during COVID. Well, we actually did a remote group just before COVID, and then it kicked in, and everybody went crazy because it turned out to be the best thing because we had nothing else to do but get on the computer and talk to each other. So, and it's been so rewarding, not only personally for me to have such a blessing in my life every week, but it's so cool to have other men that I know from various walks of life, and half the people are people I recruited into the group who I would say at least half of them have really very little spiritual underpinning, or I was blessed to be raised in a very spiritual family. 4 or 5 of the folks that I introduced to Leader Impact either had none or very little, but they were curious and they could see that they needed something in their life a little different. And to watch their growth, like the other day, we were praying for somebody at the end of a Leader Impact group. And one of the guys said, I got to just share that the first time you guys prayed, I felt really uncomfortable. But I kind of let it go because it's not my group and I was invited. But he said, now I look forward to it. Now I bring prayers to the group, and I know that our group has a heck of a track record. We've had 4 or 5 people go into remission. One in my neighborhood, this friend of ours, Lou, who was diagnosed with pretty aggressive cancer in addition to his Parkinson's. And his wife told us after we prayed for him, like, they can't find Lou's cancer. Like, it just disappeared. And we had somebody in our group just recently who's struggling with it's a precursor to a bone cancer blood cancer. And same thing, his white blood cells just took off in the right direction. He feels great. We had a heart transplant guy that we prayed for. We had a young guy with a brain tumor we prayed for that came out the other side. Like, Lisa, it's unbelievable. So this guy, who's a skeptic, he's a scientist, he came from the life science industry like me, said, when I first started with this group, I thought you guys are all a little weird. And it's an honest reaction, right? But it's so heartening to me because I had the same reaction when I went with Steve to my first Leader Impact group. I wasn't really comfortable with the group prayer thing, but as it's gone on now and it's 10 years, it's such a big part of our bond as fellow Christians or seekers, I would say, that we do this together.
Yeah, good. Getting back, we talked a little bit about business, but I want to talk about principles of success. You've talked a lot about your business and how you've got to where you are, pivotal moments, but a principle of success, what would you say is yours? And if you have a story that can illustrate that.
Well, I'm going to steal it from my friends who volunteered to be guests on our podcast. So 20 years into my business, a friend of mine from the US I'd worked with, Todd, got a hold of me. He said, your 20th anniversary. And I go, yeah. He goes, I'm very touched that you remembered. He goes, oh, I remembered. I kept track. I said, well, thanks. He's going to do anything special, he said. I said, I don't know. I'm thinking about a few things. He goes, I have an idea for you. Why don't you interview 20 of your favorite leaders over the years? And I thought, that's a brilliant idea. So my son, Eric, does podcasts for a prof at university. I thought, okay, well, I even have a podcast guy. So I interviewed these 20 amazing people, and men and women. And at the end of the podcast run, my last guest, Paul, asked me, so what have you learned? And it was one of those questions you don't expect to get, right? So I heard myself talking about some sort of real takeaways. And as I shared them with him, I started making notes about those things. And I thought, I've always thought about writing a book. And I go away every March with my wife, Christine, and take a bit of a break and update our intellectual property for our practice. So we really hunkered down last year. We ended up in Tampa area. We like to go to spring training. And all I did was write and she would edit. Luckily, she's a gifted copywriter, a copy editor. So we produced a book called Care, and it stands for those 4 principles: compelling vision, authentic culture, role modeling leadership, and then encouraging people to be the best version of themselves. That's what the acronym stands for. So we tried to write what we learned from all of our 20 some years now being in the practice, getting to meet so many great people, and also borrowed from, the other things that I've seen come across my desk or my life, in the last little while. So it was fun to get it out there, and to put it together. And now I'm getting feedback about the book. It's kind of cool. So
yeah, not all of us get to write a book on our best principle of success. So well done on Care, putting it down on paper. I'm wondering, I think, we all know we learn more from our failures and mistakes than our own successes. And have you had any? Could you share just one?
My biggest enemy is my ego. I'm a competitive person. I was gifted at school. I skipped a grade. I was in a very loving family, also very smart siblings. I had 6 older brothers and sisters. A couple of them skipped grades. They all finished first in their class. It's one of those things when you're youngest of 7, you're always getting compared to one of your older siblings by the teacher. So I felt this very high level of sense of success and competitiveness. And so that's great if you keep your eye on why you have those talents and capabilities, those inclinations. But if you're selfish about it, you can be a bit of an asshole. So, I think what I've learned, the better version of myself is when I take those gifts and talents and experiences and I try to make sure that I'm putting them to work for other people's benefit, not for my own. But I guess like any of us, Lisa, we can sometimes get caught up in our own. So I have to watch. Like my nickname when I worked in the U.S. was Sparky because I don't give up on stuff and I'm competitive. So sometimes I'll just run headlong into a brick wall just because somebody told me I couldn't get through it. So I've been my own worst enemy sometimes, just missing obvious signals, not listening, not paying attention to what really matters in life, trying to be there for other people, help other people grow. When I do that, I seem to be much better to myself and to others. So that's probably my biggest ongoing battle is maintain my focus on what God wants me to do and not what I want to do.
Yeah. I appreciate that you just shared my ongoing battle. I was going to ask you, how are you doing? Because I think I'm doing so well. And then I get my ego gets caught up and I think all about me. And then I remember, but I'm supposed to be, sharing my talents and helping other people grow.
Well, and what keeps me in check, and maybe Lisa, this is the same way for you, is I have to double down. I have to work maybe harder than most to keep myself feet on the ground and not let my ego run away and things like that. My competitiveness. I find my spiritual practice is not a nice to have. It's a have to have if I'm going to be my best self. I really have to invest in it, work at it. So I work really hard at it. Very involved in my church. LeaderImpact has a big impact on me. It's very positive. But it's something I've really leaned into, particularly in the last 10 or 15 years. And I think when I pay attention to God and what he wants for my life, and I really listen to him through not direct conversation, but, he finds his way to communicate to us through people and circumstance. And when I keep my radar on, then I find I'm in a good place. And when I turn my radio off, he's still broadcasting. I'm just not listening, So.
Yeah, I loved your comment. Just, hearing God comes in so many ways. I mean, it can come in people, it can come reading the Bible, it can come in, listening to the radio. Like it can come to you in so many ways, and just being open, right? Not turned off.
Yeah. It's, when I'm really tuned in, I'll actually have a little laugh at myself because I'll see something like today. I had a conversation with a client. It's just amazing. They've got a drug that will put people with late stage solid tumor cancer into full remission. And they showed me a patient video last week when I was with them in Houston. This was a real live video that came in that day from someone who was told they were going to die, and this was their last chance. And they had one infusion, and 2 weeks later they were hiking through a mountain. That mountain area, stopped, recorded the video, and sent it to them and said, "You guys work so hard, so I get to live. I'm in full remission, and I go to my son's graduation and my daughter's wedding. I just can't thank you enough." I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I get to work with people who do this. And I think it was a little poke from God to say, sometimes we don't know the little thing that we do, that it can result in something like that. Like I am some infinitesimally small decimal point of impact on that person's outcome, but important part, because I'm trying to help that leadership team move a little faster so people like that don't die. And I had to have a little laugh and think that was rewarding, but also humbling to see that and to feel his emotion and think, I got to take what I do seriously in a sense, and not miss how important something that I might think is innocuous in a conversation one day with a leader. Well, what's the downstream effect, the far end of that value chain? It might be something like that, right? So
yeah, that's a great point.
Sobering. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know where we are in the story. We don't know if we're this little part of someone's big story, but we were instrumental for that needle to move, Yeah. That's a good point. So, you're involved in LeaderImpact, and we want to grow personally, professionally, and spiritually for increasing impact. I'm wondering if you're willing to share, but you kind of have shared many examples of how the spiritual plays a practical difference in your life as a leader.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've noticed of late is I have a fair number of people now. I don't know if COVID was the onset of this. I think it had a big impact on all of us, but particularly that generation that was trying to find its legs, just trying to get into the workforce, right? And now they're 3, 4, 5 years post-COVID. They're my son's cohorts. And I'm really enjoying my engagement with them because there I see a bit of a return or an appetite for a sense of meaning and something that can underpin their lives that maybe they didn't have until they got this point in their own journey. Now that they're starting their families, they're getting deep into their careers. And I see this. I just read an article my sister sent me today that there's a big resurgence in the attendance in church in North America from that cohort between 18 and 30 years old. And I see that now in my day to day. And what that generation wants is some mentorship because they didn't have necessarily the underpinnings that Lisa, you and I might have got when our parents dragged us to church and we had all of that underpinning and hopefully some of it sunk into our thick heads, right? That generation doesn't have much of that. So they need mentorship. And I've been blessed that I think in my spiritual journey, this has now become something that I have to pay attention to because I think there's a need for it. And I think that there's some things I could do to help. And there's some other people. So actually, you would know Angel Morales from Leader Impact. And so I connected Angel to a group of young men just this week and trying to encourage them to start a next generation group that is going to be so much different than the old guys that I'm around with now that we've been together. And we're all in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. These young guys are in their 20s and 30s. We're going to let them have their own group. But I'm so curious to see what it's going to look like and how it's going to move forward because I know it's going to be different, but it'll be kind of fun to compare notes with my two sons that hopefully they'll be involved in it.
Yeah. We have so my group is probably the 56. No, I think I'm the oldest at 56. So 45, 50, but we have a 30-year-old in our group and she is the youngest. And we love her as much as she loves us. Just to give she is actually a manager and she manages people our age. And, that can be hard, right? For a 56-year-old to be managed by a 30-year-old. She's amazing. And so hearing both sides of the stories as someone who works with a 30-year-old or manages a 30-year-old or she's great. But yeah, they do need their own, in their own age and they're growing together as leaders, but we love having ours.
Yeah. But what's very encouraging to me, Lisa, is in the first few years where this has gotten on my radar, the one thing I find comes back and gets affirmed with me is the simple biblical truth, if you want to call that, or principle that if you first commit yourself to walk with God, to really do what he wants you to do to fulfill his purpose for your life, he'll look after everything else. Like, I can't tell you that that's a pithy thing in our Bible, that it says that in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But when you actually live by that principle, it has never failed to manifest itself. It doesn't matter if I'm exchanging some thinking with a guy my age in his 60s or somebody who's in their 20s. If they actually go ahead and dive into that end of the pool, get wet, and say, I'm going to live by your will for my life, I have yet to meet a person that doesn't come back to me and say, that's the best thing I ever did for myself and my sense of fulfillment. Actually, my next book is going to be about that because I've got some interesting stories that have come back to me in that last 5 years where I've paid attention to this. I think there's a problem in our society that we've got hooked into this pursuit of happiness thing. And I think it's wrong-headed. You end up chasing serotonin and dopamine in your brain instead of this sense that you get when you do something that's meaningful and fulfilling. Like, you would have to say in our lifetime, who do we think are some of the most fulfilled people we've ever known? They're not necessarily happy every day. Like, Mother Teresa probably wasn't happy every day, waking up with that much of pain and disease and people suffering in the streets of Calcutta. But was she fulfilled? You're darn right she was. So if we kind of use that as an example and think, what's a life well lived? It's not pursuing this false promise of happiness. It's living a life that matters. And I'm a bit of a math guy, so in my head I was writing make notes. And I said, fulfillment is the F. Our core talents are the things that God gives us, experiences, our sort of central talents, times the number of people we help. Like, there's a bit of a formula there, right? And I think if you pay attention to that, it's kind of like, we have a performance review at work every year. At the end of the year, our boss sits down, did you have a good year or not? And blah, blah. Imagine if you just tried to put yourself in your life performance review. You really put yourself in that conversation with God at the end and just boom, you're there. And he's sitting with you in whatever form, whether Jesus is there and Peter and Paul and everybody else, who knows? But let's say there's some accountability. What is the measure of your success? Is it, were you happy? No. I think he's going to say, did you do what I designed you to do with the advantages and the talents I gave you? And I think it's going to be our success, if you want to call it that, and a life well lived is going to be about fulfillment, not happiness.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. I can't wait for fulfillment now. Keep us in the loop on that. I have two last questions for you. At LeaderImpact, we're dedicated to leaders having a lasting impact. So as you continue through this amazing journey that you are on, have you considered what you want your faith legacy to be when you leave this world?
Yeah, that I wrestled with God.
Wow. So good. You wrestle with God every day?
Every day.
Yeah. I think some people think it's easy.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They may look at you and they're just like, he's got it together.
No, I read as much as I do about it. I'm in a course right now with my church with a whole bunch of other people. It's kind of a formative 4-year program. I'm taking it because it allows me to really pursue that wrestling with other people. And LeaderImpact does that for me too. That to me is, Lisa, that's what I hope people would say about me that are commenting on my spiritual life. He never stopped wrestling with God.
Yeah. I'm taking a course Hearing God. And it is, but when you say wrestle with God, it's, it's a good course. So that's a great one. I'm in awe. That was really good. My last question for you is, what brings you the greatest joy?
This one's not hard to give you an answer. It's hard to talk about because it's very emotional, but my biggest joy comes from seeing people become the bigger version of themselves. Doesn't matter if it's a little kid I'm coaching on a ball diamond or someone who's preparing for the end of life. I did some spiritual coaching in the hospital for a few years, or everything in between that. If there's something I can do, thanks to God, to help them move themselves forward in any way, that's my harvest. It's nice that there's some people who want to pay me to do that so I can pay my bills. But at the end of the day, one of my first bosses, Dave, had this great expression when I was a salesman. He said, you don't have to sell something every day. You just have to think, did I bring value to somebody's practice today? That's what you're paid to do. Because I was calling on doctors at the time. So I think about Dave quite a bit because I want to put my feet on the floor and every day when I wake up, think, yesterday did I help someone be a slightly bigger version of themselves as God defines that? That's kind of my scorecard, I guess, Lisa, if I had to pin it down to something.
Wow. That's good. That's deep. You're a deep guy.
Well, I grew up in a town called Deep River. Is that?
Jeez, Rob. That is funny. And now you're in Port Hope.
Yeah. See, there's a nuclear theme here, so if the lights go out, you could just follow me home because they all glow. The little nuclear plant that I grew up next to, Chalk River, is actually where my dad was the reeve, and we lived in Chalk River. So, yeah, I don't know. The nuclear thing follows me around. Now they're building the world's biggest nuclear reactor right down the street from us. So I guess the theme will continue for the rest of my life.
Yeah, you're the guy that glows. You're the guy that glows and wrestles with God.
That's it.
Yeah. Rob, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. You have given us some great answers, some great discussion points that I'm going to take forward with my LeaderImpact. It's been a joy just spending this time with you.
You too, Lisa.
And I look forward to your next book, which is going to be on fulfillment. So we'll look out for that. If people want to follow you and engage with you, maybe ask you some questions, what's the best place to find you?
Well, 2 places probably the best. LinkedIn, you can always find me on LinkedIn under Thrive. I'm also associated with Barrett, which is the group we use for culture. And then our website, thriveatwork.ca, or people can just good old-fashioned call me. The phone does ring, 905-717-7852. I'll answer. Happy to engage with people. You can get our book on Amazon. It's under my name, Robert Seguin, under CARE, C-A-R-E, all capital letters. And look for fulfillment this time next year if I live up to my personal commitment.
Well, you're going to have to get away to, I think, Florida and have your wife copyright your book or editor.
Well, elbows up. We're going to Puerto Rico instead.
Oh, elbows up. I love it.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you again for joining us. It has been a joy.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lisa. Take care.
All right. Well, if you're part of LeaderImpact, You can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. And if you're not yet part of Leader Impact and would like to find out more and grow your leadership, find our podcast page on our website at leaderimpact.ca. You can also check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a comment, give us a rating or review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us. And remember, impact starts with you.